Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Center for Architecture and Metropolitan Planning. I'm Jaké and I will be the host for tonight, for this evening. Today you have a great chance to join another Urban Talks, another episode from our series where we meet famous architects from all around the world. And today we have a chance to speak with Civic Architects, with Gert Quackenboom, partner and architect from Civic Architects from Amsterdam. As you know, you have a chance to ask us a question. You can join slido.com using hashtag CampWeOnline. You will join our chat room and you will ask us questions. I will see them on our tablet and I will ask Gert about them. Gert, welcome to camp. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting us to participate in your urban talks.
How are you? How are you, Amsterdam?
Yeah, we're good. The weather is good, so everyone's happy. Actually, to be honest, we are working from the office a little bit part-time with the team ourselves too. Yeah, we're doing quite okay, recovering a bit from the desolate times of working from home only.
Yeah, I think it's very similar in case of the weather in Czech Republic, and also in case the offices they are partly empty. We are still working online and remote, so it's a very interesting season for us in connotation of the coronavirus and everything. I'm really happy that you decided to join us because this Urban Talks is the last Urban Talks before the summer break. And so it's very important for us, and we are happy that we can talk to you about your projects because your projects are very important and very famous right now. And they were really successful on our Facebook. People were really interested about the projects, so I'm happy that we can talk to you. Before we started, I asked you if it's possible to show us your office where you are sitting right now. Is it possible to show us where you're working?
I can try a little bit to just share you a bit.
That will be great.
It's mostly empty now, but just to give you a bit of an impression, we are quite small and young firm. We're a 5-year-old firm working from Amsterdam.
How many people are working there?
Yeah, I think about 10 people, but as if you can see at the moment, it's rather empty. Yeah?
Wow. It's not really empty.
Only my business partner Jan is here working still.
Yeah, hello from Prague.
But just to give you a bit of an idea, we're working 10 people in a kind of rough studio working environment. Really a working place, you see. So running projects, studies are hanging up the walls.
Yeah, great.
We'll be able to discuss them a bit.
Yeah, a lot of visualizations.
Yeah, some of them are studies or competition entries, entry books. So we approach the company as a bit of an open workshop where the whole team can be involved in every project there is. And we have a little meeting room. But
I can see there are some interesting windows. Do you have some pictures from the exterior?
Yeah. There you go. It's these kind of shapes are almost hip again, but this is actually a concrete 80s, early 90s office building in the periphery of the city, close to a new development area. It's a good place to be here.
You can find this type of windows on socialist architecture in Czech Republic from 70s and 80s too, but they are really rare now. But they are starting to be modern again. So it's very interesting.
After the iPhone, these type of design themes are okay again.
Okay, great. So if you're ready, I will be really happy if you start your presentation because I'm looking for what we are finding in it, and after that, I will be ready to ask you some questions. So if you're ready, it's yours.
All right. Thank you so much. Yeah, I gathered some of our projects. I think the most important of it being the public library we did in the city in the south of the Netherlands. But we also did other things. So I thought maybe just give you a bit of an overview of the things we do. We're a young firm, so we're really explorative in this phase. and trying to grasp the things we think are important. And in some projects, it works out quite nicely already. Some are more like experiments or thoughts or first considerations. And I first wanted just to explain you a bit why we're doing what we're doing and why we're Civic. And that's because, yeah, we really believe that, especially among young firms here in the Netherlands, it's quite hard to focus on public architecture. The residential real estate has been growing after the last financial crisis, but public architecture not so much. So as a young firm, we really try to focus there. So let me just browse you through some of our thoughts and ideas and ambitions first. That starts actually with this quote from the text we read when we were students. It's by this French philosopher thinker Georges Bataille, that architecture and society are somehow very related. So in a way, you can read societies by looking at the architectures if you look back in time. But on the other hand, the things you're doing now also show what you are and what you want to be. And it's a quote we always found really interesting when we studied. It's a bit of a studenty text, to be honest, but still quite a relevant motivation to do what we're doing. Because yeah, if there's no such thing as collective architecture to organize societies, things are a big mess, as you can imagine. And actually, since the beginning of time, we've been collaborating. People have been collaborating to construct common or collective structures for defense, for development of societies. When they start new towns, the first thing they do is obviously build the bank, build the saloon, build the prison. And we are somehow interested in what type of buildings have been relevant and are relevant in societies, and how they can also, up till nowadays times, how do they tell what we are, what we do, and vice versa. So that's something we constantly consider as a background to the work we do. And one of the big inspirations we have there is this analytical book. It's by Nicolaus Pessner, a German-British historian, who wrote this history of building types, public building types. And some of them are at the moment very old-fashioned already, but for us it's a great source of seeing how actually architecture has always been an evolutionary discipline. So buildings live longer than the humans who built them, huh? So in a way, they're slower than history is, and they're the remnants of how our societies developed. And he did this quite accurate historical analysis of how the topologies changed and evolved. For instance, this is one from the town halls from back in the medieval times to current times. Must be honest, it's a bit of a European focused book. So in a way, it also lacks some of the non-European inspirations. But it's a work we constantly refer to. This is one of the overviews of how theater spaces have been developing, from the Shakespearean theater to the Teatro Olimpico, to all the more relevant typological changes through time. And that's something we really enjoy studying in. So we really enjoy looking back in the past, but also not forgetting to look forward into the future. And we thought the best way to express that is to call our firm Civic, which literally means such a thing as belonging to a town or city or the people who live in it. So it actually has no owner because everyone owns it. But if people leave, it's not theirs anymore. And that's what we try to do with the firm, diving into the themes that are relevant and that are pushers or that are shapers of how our public urban topologies, building topologies work, from how society deals with safety, with local culture or global culture, with the position of the city as a entity as a dominant entity in the built world. And these themes, we're interested in, we think are relevant, also shaping architecture and vice versa. So this is a selection of some of the projects we did, of which many of us are also competitions we didn't win, but they were all still as valuable as the ones we did, as study, as explorations of themes and public building topologies. And that goes as far from universities to infrastructural buildings like stations or landscape interventions, new settlements, public passages, but also shopping malls, and even a small mosque we were able to design a couple of years ago. So this is a bit of a broad perspective on what we do. And this is us. Civic is formed by 4 partners, because we also really believe in like the interactive play of designing together and getting some cumulative knowledge and precision in things we do. So we always work with 2 or more partners on one project, assisted by a team of 10 of younger architects and draftsmen, and some interns that are able to do a learning half year or 3 months in our firm. And yeah, I added this one to show how we like to work, because we believe that every person can. We believe in the specialist. Every person in the team or the consultants that are really specialized in something can bring projects further. And altogether, they could bring even a rocket to the moon, as these people all did. All of them being specialized in specific parts of the process. So altogether, we try to, with this firm, try to make cultural durable. So projects that are buildings that do survive people and extend time, publicly shared, so the common issues, and memorable experience. We hope we can really offer a built environment that leaves a trace, and people remember the experiences they had, because we believe spatial experiences are still the experience that do stick in the memory of people. Just to as a short introduction, and I'd like to share with you some of the projects we do. Every one of them starting with a theme we believe is interesting, and has been a certain driver in the background of these projects to ensure a vivid and rich design process. The first of which is the notion of the familiar in relation to the unfamiliar. And that starts with our fascination for global developments on the one hand, interchangeable ideas, interchangeable references, and knowledge on a global level, but at the same time, a very strong renewed interest in local culture and local habits and rituals even, or tradition. And since maybe some of these more global developments became a bit too big or just incomprehensible, or also lose some of the refinements of the cultures that we live in. So in the design of a public railway passage we designed a couple of years ago, we believe this theme was a relevant background. Let me explain you a bit more about the project. It's about cyclist and pedestrian route underneath an existing railway track and through a new urban development area, where the client somehow was not so sure about the public safety of this place and asked us to design some interactive lighting system to guide the people through this not so safe, possibly unsafe area. They wanted the tunnel of the future. And I must confess, one of the other little sins we have is watching science fiction. So we're not only interested in history, but also in the future. And we read this interesting article about how technology, which is a kind of unconnected thing, has been always a kind of unconnected thing, how that's kind of changing. If you compare for instance, there was a science fiction analysis of the Minority Report film with Tom Cruise, a bit of an older science fiction, and the new one, the Her film. And what's actually quite striking about these two films is that technology in the future, in the past, we considered technology to be very intense, and people were really like using their hands and using their full bodies to interact. Yeah, you see here Tom Cruise standing like this, interacting with these screens. So apparently the future or technology was some kind of alien thing where you needed to interact with. And strikingly enough, in this newer science fiction, technology is actually just a kind of aware environment that also has a kind of romantic, or can have a bit of a warm environment, and that's kind of familiar to interact with. And it doesn't really have it's kind of a common technology to interact with. And that's actually something we thought is really interesting if you think about how technology can support urban life, urban transport systems in this case. So what you actually try to do is to integrate this technology of cameras and interactive lighting that responded to the people that were cycling by as a kind of neutral element in the city. And therefore, we started looking at what the city, what is common and what is familiar really was in the city of Tilburg, analyzing the streets around this passage, and finding out what is the familiar and the common denominator in scale and rhythm in building system. So after a quite long analysis on rhythm, we made this little diagram to show that actually this tunnel maybe should not be this kind of carnival of technology and light and cameras, but could be something that refers to the scale that people already know, and be a kind of augmented version of the familiar, of that what was already there. And we've been working with a specialized glass manufacturer there to reproduce the kind of brickwork detailing, sizing in a new type of product, together with a lighting manufacturer, Philips, at the time. And that resulted in a kind of new product, which was a light emitting brick system, you could say, that at the same time during the day was this kind of refined crystal glass urban wallpaper, with a scale and with a rhythm and with detailing that somehow referred to that what the people already knew. And together with this glass manufacturer, we developed a method to recycle glass and to melt it into 18,000 unique glass objects, glass brick elements that were integrated in this system of light and aluminium structure, and altogether became a light-emitting glass brick wall. Here seen as in the ending the tunnel, exiting the tunnel, and entering the city again. At the same time, with the LED system that was behind it, system is even able to produce also color schemes and interactivity towards the people that were passing by. And if you just look back to the details we did and the patterns we designed together with light designers, and compare it to what was already there and the details that were already in the city of Tilburg itself, you see they're not the same. They're very much not the same, but in a way they relate as being family of that was already there, like a new hybrid or a new landmark that was grown from that what people already knew, what was already there. So this is an example of a project where we try to really push technology, not to be technology, but to be something that has a sort of familiarity where people can relate to, but people can also feel comfortable with. There was a project from a couple of years ago, and in the same city, we did another competition a couple of years later, the local public library, which really, in a way, is also a moment in our research on what's the contemporary public interior. We all know public space is very important. We're all now also learning that again in these times. But actually, to be honest, if you see the publicly built buildings, they're becoming less and less public interiors. We all know the examples from the past. Even churches back in times were just places where people would just go in and out because it was one of the central places and moments in people's lives, and people were just, even when there was no rituals going on, they were even trading in church, they were taking their dog. It was kind of a general place to go. And libraries obviously also used to be these places where people would go to be enlightened, to learn about the world, to gather knowledge. And the public interiors that belong with it really express this. But us now living in a time of digital information, it does raise the question, what does the public interior mean in the 21st century? If people can all read their books, it's a common question to librarians and library directors. People can all read their books online, what's left there? Well, actually, the public library is one of the strongest public interiors I think the contemporary world, architecture world knows. So in a way, that was also one of the driving forces behind the local public library projects, like searching for this strong sense of public interior and public awe in a way that fits the 21st century. And let me explain you a little bit about the background of the project, because it's a transformation project of I hope you can see my mouse, of a very big urban redevelopment project, where the National Railway Workshop of the Dutch National Railway System had all kind of industrial complexes where the locomotives and the carriages of the trains were being built and repaired. And it was situated in the city, almost in the city center of a late industrial Dutch city, where the train station is situated here. It's a beautiful building, by the way. And one of the most important buildings of that whole development area was the locomotive fabrication hall, the lock hall it was called. It's a shed, a big industrial shed with light from the top where all the locks were produced and made. And then redeveloping this whole area with also new residential towers even all around, this building was saved and preserved as the building to be a public meeting place. Sorry, a public meeting place where all the people that actually 1/5 of the whole community has been working in this area could regain this place where they all had been working on trains as a place for public knowledge. And just to give you a bit of an idea, in the early 20th century, this hall was built to really lift locomotives through the whole area and enable the workers to maintain them and to assemble them. And this kind of this enormous space, a kind of industrial cathedral in a way, you see here in one of the first get-togethers during the competition, was to be given back to the public and could also become this new public interior where the whole community could find a place to learn new things and to read books. And that search for how this building should work was on the one hand given by the fact that this building has always been a place for fabrication and a place for industry. And at the same time, a research we did, I'm sorry, it's in Dutch, I now notice, the research we did on how the public library typology changed through time. How it started from being a warehouse, a safe place to store books and knowledge, to a place to educate the people and to make the people independent and enable them to learn reading, and to become a forum and a democratic place. But at the moment, maybe reinventing itself in a place that's not about storing knowledge or accessing knowledge, but about combining or curating platforms. So as the same way the digital platforms for knowledge and music and what else not exist, this public library could also become a place where, which is a platform for the creation of new knowledge. We made these diagrams to explain how the spatial layout and how the concept for the building was derived from that idea to be a place for creating knowledge. So this is the brief we received when we started the competition with all the type of books. So it's the kitchen, it's the cooking books, it's the adult books, it's the youth books, it's the science books, it's the media. There's even still DVDs and CD-ROMs in the public libraries nowadays. But what actually is more important is the space in between. There are the places where knowledge and people can meet. The library director itself was interested in developing a kind of laboratory spaces, which are open platforms, and for which the books and the knowledge forms the actual background. And these places, all well connected to a super generous open public space, would perform as a public interior where people were really easily invited to contribute, to share, to benefit from the knowledge that was stored there and from the people that were there with all their knowledge stored again and their associative power. So actually this building is more of a open structure, an open skeleton, you could even say, with some of these laboratory spaces inside. So you'll see, maybe some of you have already seen some pictures, but you'll see that actually the architectural type is quite a generic open architectural landscape in which all these specific places form kind of magnets where the books are stored around and where people are coming towards. And well, the main task for us was to at the same time maintain this enormous cathedral-like industrial space to be this productive shed for knowledge. And we found a way to add more of the program or move more of the program to the side and have a stacked set of floors that gradually go upwards and bring the people up to the light and to the silence to work. And at the same time, retaining this massive scale for the full 110 meters in the long side and the 60 meters in the short side. So here are some of the images of the result, where you can see these 60 meters this side. It's quite an orthogonal building. It's really in the X, Y, and Z axis. And that's the structure we followed with the logistic structure we followed with the new architecture. You can see from the entrance zone where the activities are a bit more loud and a bit more open, and which is actually a public event hall in a way, with a big auditoriums there where you can have events and lectures. Going up towards the lecture hall, for instance, in the back, and the more silent and cozy reading areas on the top. Here are some of these where there's study places all going around a lowered business area, and meeting places just as a public staircase. And gradually, if you go up, it becomes more and more silent, becomes more and more light, and more of a place to just pick out your laptop and work for a couple of hours. And then afterwards go down, take your coffee. Actually, you're allowed now to bring your coffee all up in the building, which also gives a kind of vivid atmosphere. People walking to and fro and meeting and working. Here's a bit of an overview on how this new structure was gently settled inside the existing structure. So the existing column structure is composed columns and cranes that were carrying all these logs. And the new architectural intervention going up with these platforms, but also you go higher, going around in a kind of H-shaped walkabout, connecting to the facades and to the scale of these windows, which from a distance look so tiny, but from nearby are actually quite massive. Going up all around and enabling people also to have a view towards the city again. And in the middle of all this, we together with a textile designer thought of a system to temporarily make use of these open spaces for events, for lectures, for breakout sessions, and also even to be able to isolate the big concert hall and the open working square from the working area around, with a set of massive curtains, movable curtains, which are on the highest point 17 meters high. And here, I think 6 meters. They're on rails and they're motorized. And they make this building even more into a vivid machine to work and play and to learn new things. A very open, fun palace in a way. And on top of all of this is this enormous, diversified set of things to interact with. So it's the bookshelves, it's the tables to work, it's the cushions and the seats that are movable on the staircase. It's the bar, it's the tables that are actually all arranged in this more generic landscape that's formed by the enormous scale of the new architecture. And you see some of the curtains in relation to the places and how they work. For instance, here's one. This enormous reading table can also be used as a stage where people can sit on the staircase to form an audience. And they're all movable. This is some of the old rails where the trains went in and out. And in the furniture design, actually Meccano, Dutch firm Meccano, did the furnishing design, building these new elements out of existing relics. Here's one of these hangouts, you could say, made a bit more intimate with the curtain system. And people are really, they use the space just to hang out, to wait, to read, to play with their phones, and to use this whole building as a place just to be, not really needing to do something or to consume something, but just be there and make use of the potential the building has. Some of these curtains are also used as a kind of voile or as a light deflecting element to make things dark or maybe semi-transparent to obscure what is happening inside. And at the same time, they have this kind of industrial wink towards the past use of the building. And then if you zoom into these labs, the interiors of all these laboratories, you get a very diverse world of experience. So there's different of these labs. Some of them are about the digital world. Some are about opinions and about debate. Some about learning to write and to learn writing from a writer, but also to read about writing in the books that are presented there. And so this set of labs, each of these labs, they interact with a different type of target group. This is the writing lab, for instance, and it's like wholly pictured as a place that emits this one atmosphere where you can do your writing in this bird's nest somewhere in the building, which is open for the rest of it. This is the DG lab, which is about programming and coding, and where people can learn to. Also, the senior citizens that can also still learn to work with the internet and getting lessons on how you can do safe internet use, but also young people just learning to code and using serious gaming to also learn. This is one of the debating rooms where the more societal debates are taking place, where different religious organizations have their home base to start to have debates with each other, but also with the general public. And it's much more of a soft, comfy space, as one of these labs interact with. And the cafe is also one of them, with the super heavy urban tiling, actually like a kind of urban kiosk placed inside this building. One of the other things we try to achieve with the project is, in a way, blending the new architecture with the old one, also when it comes to style and material and scale. Because the existing building is, in a way, very much out of scale. It's something you can only experience when you're there. So I'll come visit if you have the time in a couple of months, hopefully. It's really something spatial, specific. And we really try to also have the new architecture get the same kind of robustness and the same kind of rhythm. For instance, the new columns that carry the new floors, they follow the structure of the old ones. They are composed new columns, but they are new, and they're also really recognizable as new. But in a way, they follow the kind of the vibe. They follow the rhythm of the existing structure. And also with the new railings, for instance, which are in dimensions quite exaggerated, but it's the only way to make them work with the existing structure, which the dimensions are so out of scale in relation to the buildings that you usually build as an architect. We really need to find the right exaggeration of scale to make this all blend into one strong entity, and not make the new thing too fragile in relation to the existing. Here's one of the working places higher in the building where the new glass meeting places and studio working places are relating to the rhythm of the existing facade. And here a bit of an overview on how all these things come together in this new public interior, which is not purely an interior. Actually, to reposition this building as a key player in the urban tissue, we also extended it on the south side. So if you analyze the history of this workshop area, you see all these small linear working sheds from early 20th century. And later in the 20th century, they were added and transformed, and this kind of locomotive hall had this glass paneling wall around, but was not accessible to the public. So the most important urban gesture that was done designing the project was to extend the building on the south side with one extra segment, and by that confirming its position on the public boulevard, and at the same time organizing entrances which connect also the inner squares of the industrial area with a very generous entrance canopy, which look like this now in the end from the train tracks, with a public balcony, which is an exhibition place in the top where people can have their view outwards, looking back at the city, looking back at the trains, and also looking to the south side of the railway tracks. Yeah, you can see, you remember this is you recognize this is the first image, actually extending with an extra structural line in the same rhythm as the existing building. On the north side, more subtly, having an extra entrance, also within the rhythm and within the structure of that was already there. So far for the local public library, there are some of the other themes I want to explain to you a bit more brief way. One of which is a temporary exhibition pavilion we made for the Frankfurt Book Fair. It's one of the more important international literature events in the Frankfurt Messe, and there we did a temporary pavilion for the Dutch and the Belgium Literature Fund, which were really exploring how people in a world of digitization also still use their haptic sensors and their other sensoric sensors, and how you could improve or trigger those with through architecture or exhibition design. So we all look at our screens much more. Our visual senses are becoming stronger and stronger, and we lean much more and more within. But we must not forget that there's all these other sensory systems that we have, of which some are a bit hardcore. Smell, for instance, and taste and sound are quite heavy senses to trigger through architecture, because closing your eyes is quite easy to do, but closing your ears or your nose, it's harder. But still, this project, we used it to experiment a little bit with what the sensory and also the moving of the physical body through space does. So it's a temporary exhibition space, which is built by walls that change while you move. through in. So they're transparent if you look in one direction, and they are much more open if you look from the other one, because they're built of these tubular polycarbonate paneling systems. And by that, actually, moving through space becomes an experience that's not in any way comparable to only having the visual stimuli or shooting it on film. And at the same time, this whole pavilion was built with a very big brick floor, which loose laid bricks, which did little clicks if you walked through them, and really had the people walking through experience the effect of their own action and the sound triggered by walking through and wandering through this metaphorical beach in the exhibition to find literary treasures. Really, stimulating all the sensoric, all the senses that we could. And in the background, a very slow, super slow, dynamic animation of a changing sea landscape, or a kind of abstract version of a sea landscape, which in 1 hour changed, I think, in 10 minutes, real time. And actually also triggering the sense of time, playing a game with the sense of time of the visitor, enabling them also to just relax and have a kind of physical experience in this enormous fair, which is a commercial book fair, where there's a lot of visual stimuli all around all these halls. The projection screen was built of a very tactile fabric that we could interact with, where were also books positioned. And as said, the walls were changing openness, and actually, in a way, it's quite a basic and primitive way of designing, but very effective. Having the person's visual stimuli triggered by only walking around the space, and at the same time making intimate spaces to watch a film or documentary. Another project, I still have some time, huh, Martin? Yeah, another project it's also a build one, and that explores common grounds and common values in a highly commercialized and compressed world we live in. We all know, I'm not going to, it's a bit of almost of a cliche story, but we all know that when there was enough space, we had these common grounds, these commons that were free to roam for everyone. And in some countries, for instance, in Scotland, they still have this kind of right to roam around. In Sweden, I guess so too. Belonging to no one, but at the same time belonging to anyone, no one claiming it. But yeah, in our world of metropolization, you could say, it's harder to find these spaces. It's even harder to get the air pollution on a level where everyone can still work with. And we also see it in our cities, and in the projects we do, we at least try to grasp that which has a common value and to give that a place, or to translate it also into the new. There's this harbor pavilion we've been making in a also industrial harbor, which is situated on a central pier in the middle of that place, which was one of the most popular places to hang out, smoke a cigarette, to do some fishing for the people in these neighborhoods. Part of these neighborhoods were socially quite monofunctional, and some of them also a bit poorer neighborhoods. So people really went out to meet each other in the street and to hang around this waterside. And now we were asked to design a restaurant pavilion on this exact point, which was actually like this beloved place for the people over there. So this public square was this busy spot of water activities, but actually we were asked to somehow exclude part of the public and include that part of the public that was able or willing to pay for a drink in the restaurant. And a lot of debating with the local government and with the developer. We at least managed to have a talk about reorganizing the spatial setup and enabling people to really still go there and throw your rod out to go fishing and to have a kind of generous gesture towards the water. Still, even because terrace area is obviously the most valuable area for a summer restaurant, enabling us to actually have a double version of this public pier area in shape of the roof that we proposed there, where people could just get up and without buying a drink, could just hang out and even enjoy the view. A nicer view because you're slightly elevated above the water, making it accessible through stairs and with a big opening for daylight. We enable to make a kind of hybrid public and private building, which in the end enable the people to still appreciate their place and their view on this central pier, and at the same time enabling the restaurant holder to do commercial business. The shape and the color of the building relates much to the historical ships that are in the canal zone there. There are museum ships. There are some of the older industrial ships that used to be in the canal there, and this new rough black steel hovering shape blends well, becomes part of this family of nautical elements. And what we're quite proud of is that together with a steel manufacturer, we were able to engineer this element going around, this elevated platform, this disc, not as something that's only a beautiful detail going around, but at the same time being a structural element and a railing and balustrade, which was also enabled the contractor to build the building without building extra scaffolding on the water, because calculating it together with structural engineers, we found a way to make them into one piece and to really produce them as separate elements in the metal workshop and hang them on site as a kind of big infrastructural system, which in the end cantilevers also on the top where the people enter the space where they can go up. Where they can go up into this elevated platform, enjoy their view, experiencing the landscape, the beautiful canal harbor landscape, and also because of the low railing actually being quite high above the water, and at the same time kind of a simple but effective restaurant, and here enjoying your view on top. We've seen people doing yoga, we've seen people just hanging out there, also young people hanging out there. That's the disadvantage, at least for the municipality a bit, but yeah, it's also part of urban life, of course. Yeah, I want to as a finalization, I want to share a project we're working on right now. It's not being delivered yet. Construction starts soon, and it's a museum space. And working on this museum triggered us in thinking about how the museum typologies have been evolving and how they might also influenced by current times and the way we think about storytelling in a time where actually a almost more postmodern approach to knowledge and history becomes more relevant and relevant. We think it's an interesting topic to study, and the project we're now doing, the Leather and Shoe Museum, it is in a town in the south of the Netherlands, is a nice example of it. Because this museum director, he hates museums that work like this, that are like obligatory routes where people are standing with their hands to their backs, watching these artworks. He's aiming for a much more interactive and diverse way of experiencing a museum, and to compose and assemble stories and associations and interactions of pieces of art, or in this example, pieces of history by themselves. Because at the same time, also you see that walking through a museum the old way is also something that's that fits less and less with the contemporary society and knowledge consumption. There's this art project where people are running through museums and only catch the highlights, because that's also what some of the people are interested in, watching museums. And if you want a broad audience, at least make sure that every type of participant can get what they want, and maybe in the meantime experience something extra. And for the project, we did a brief analysis on typical museum typologies, road typologies, and we tried to find a way to actually make a less forced and a bit more tinkered and manufactured and ensembled way of experiencing museum space. And this is one of the, it's an existing building, so this is one of the images. I'll write you a bit briefer, and it's a very layered place in itself. This is an old this is a listed monument in the south of the Netherlands. It's an old town hall ensemble from the 30s. It's kind of neo-medieval architecture from an Amsterdam architect, and it's nationally preserved. And in the 80s, an extension was added. A office building was built that became this ensemble of town hall and office building. But at the moment it is empty, and this whole wing of this partially listed area and office area in the 80s is going to be transformed to be this new leather heritage and shoe fashion museum. The big question was how to transform a 80s office building into a kind of relaxed museum typology. So the main intervention we proposed is to add an extra building to somehow surpass the super rigid logistic typology of an office space. And this used to be this interior space, and by covering it and by cutting it and sawing in it and adding elements to it, we generate a new kind of labyrinth or 3D playful area routing to enable the museum visitor to just experience a route that he or she likes to follow himself. So basically reorganizing the logistic system of the old entrance hall with corridors with the extra extension to become a much more open and interesting museum space. This is a model out of it. So there's kind of fragmented wall system with openings that enable the people to just explore and to find their way as if they are doing an urban exploring session or something comparable, and then experience art and history in the meantime. Cutting open the office building from the 80s with big circular openings, circular holes, to really show that the structure is open to the public itself. Here are some fragments on how that works, like adding, cutting, sawing elements, and this whole building becomes more of an assemblage or an eclectic combination of added and subtracted elements than a rigid structure. But people can find their way and experience, have an interesting experience where the past of the building and the collection add all up to it. And at the same time, opening the old corridors to really have a very much low, accessible, highly accessible space from children until the elderly. So we're really excited to also work on this type of building and to find a way to also make the museum typology, which is in a way also a bit of a highbrow typology, accessible to a broader public and also fitting the needs of contemporary society. Because that's something we're very much interested in. I hope I've been able to explain that a bit, and I'm also looking forward very much to your response and to your questions, and maybe we can have some interaction and see how this works, all through Zoom. So thank you very much, all of you, and looking forward to the Q&A.
Thank you very much for your presentation. I have to say that this is pretty much my cup of tea, so I'm excited about the project that I saw. I have some questions. I have seen that we have also some questions on our platform, slido.com. First of all, I would like to ask you about the pavilion because it's a really nice project. I think it's pretty close to the community of the city, and I would like to ask you if there were some discussion with the people who live around the harbor, because you said that this place was used to meeting people, relax, enjoying the free space and some air. In I can see the dense area. Were people involved in the discussion, in the planning the project?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good question. Actually, as a matter of fact, in this project, they were involved, but in the beginning, before we were playing a part. You must know this development, this little pavilion, was part of a bigger landscape plan to redevelop the whole water side of this canal. So there were a lot of new pocket parks being added. There was a watchtower being added at the end of the canal. And this pavilion was one part of that story. So all these sub-projects, they had their participatory projects. So these pocket parks, all the people living around were involved in developing the pocket park. And this project was somehow hovering above a bit because it was there was no direct audience, but everyone was in a way involved. But they were involved in the earlier phase to think about what would be happening there. But during the design process, they were actually not. So it was the urban designer of the city who was in contact with them, but we were not literally working with them, to be honest. Yeah, but I don't know. Yeah, it makes me very happy if I sit there and have a drink and see that people are still fishing. Young kids are hanging out, and some of them are just not taking a drink or doing something, but they find the place and they just do whatever they want to do.
So reactions were positive?
Yeah.
Okay,
really.
Great. There is another question that is focused on the library, and it's about the noise. How you solve the noise problem in the library, because it's open space, and silence is pretty much topic in every library. How did you solve that?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's different layers to this question. So at first, what we did during the design process, because we have always during the design, especially the library director, has been he has also been a bit nervous about how that would work out. So together with the engineering firm, which was Arab in this case, we did audio virtual reality modeling. So we modeled the noise levels on different types of spaces. And you could move through the 3D model with your goggles, and we were in this deaf room, you call it maybe, at least that's how we call it, this non-reverbing space where we could only experience the sound that was modeled. We moved through the building and we experienced different noise levels. And actually noise levels is the right word for it. So there are secluded spaces where you're actually totally silent. But there are also a lot of spaces which are just a little bit noisy, but noisy in a way, in a white noise kind of way. The building is so big and the reflections are so far away that there is some noise, but it's so diffuse that you cannot hear specific things happening. And that's actually, it's almost even better than a silent space because it blends out also noises that are made through the space. So actually the size of the existing space and the reflections of it make the noise very homogeneous and in a way also distractive or calm. And the last thing to mention there is, I think that the thinking about which activities go where played an important role in making this building work. For instance, the children's library, which is a bit more playful, where kids can also just climb some interior elements that were designed. They're actually underneath the ground floor auditorium stairs. So they are actually secluded in a way, isolated as a noise, very unpredictable noise-producing factor. And yeah, that's 80 meters, more than 80 meters away, and also closed off from the more silent working spaces. So that's the way it works. But it is a more vivid building. It's not a university library, as some people know it. So some super secluded, silent place. This is a bit more of a vivid urban area, but still people are really comfortable working there. Not really bothered by the sound.
Yeah, we can also mention that Log Hall Public Library in Tilburg is a winner of World Building of the Year of 2019. That's pretty impressive. So
yeah, but it's really I'm really happy to see that refurbishment and refurbishment projects also are now on a level internationally becoming seen on a level that's extending the way we did it before. I recall having a kind of 2-week workshop in Beijing 3 years ago, or now 5 years ago, where we were working with this old industrial area, and we were thinking about preserving and transforming some of these buildings. And the Chinese contributors to the workshop they had no idea what we were talking about. And it's partially a cultural thing, but also a sustainability issue. And I'm really happy that this project has been awarded some international recognition in prizes and awards to show that working with what you have can be super interesting. Also in the museum project, I really see it as a benefit that we have this actually annoying office building from the 80s, but that opens up new ways to work with it and to have a layered experience. I think it's very, very valuable that the world sees this.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's a very actual topic in Czech Republic too, and it's something I want to ask you about because I think it's something like a trend or something significant for today's architecture. Do you think this is something that describes architecture of these years, of this era? Do you think that this is the actual style of architecture, refurbishing, transforming something what we have, trying to work with our industrial history and things like that?
Maybe it is. I don't know about the Czech Republic, but in the Netherlands, I think this has been a topic for the last 10 or 20 years already. But up till now, it has been enclosed more within the Dutch context, and maybe slightly within other European countries. But on an international level, yes, I do see it. And it also brings a kind of aesthetic, because that is also really interesting. This public library looks like it looks because it was already there, and it's a kind of industrial building, which it marks, and it has been partially repainted, and it has this kind of open-ended atmosphere in it, which really has a generosity towards the people. It just invites you to come and just do whatever you feel like, in a way, because it's not a very polished and perfect
what's the reason? What's the reason that we like industrial buildings and architecture like this? Why we like it on Instagram? Why we like it on Facebook? Because we see it right now and we like it. It's something different from classical architecture, from residential architecture from last 10 years, for example, or last decades. It has huge windows, there is a metal, there is a steel, there are materials on the top. What was the reason why we like it so much right now?
So it's also a dangerous topic, because one of the answers could also be it's nostalgism, which is not such a good motivator, I believe, to do things, because all this industrial heritage is not functional anymore, at least not in the Netherlands. I don't know. For us, it is this kind of openness. It emits this atmosphere of just come and play with me, do something with it. In a way, it's hyper functional. And the funny thing is, I just showed this picture of Dialosco Video Refro's The Shed in New York, Manhattan, which is now also somehow absorbing this industrial aesthetic in a new building, which I really dig. I really think is interesting, because also this cultural venue suddenly emits this or radiates this atmosphere of a playground or a workshop or culture. And it's something in all the projects we do. Even if we do a museum, we really try to find this level of rawness or roughness where people are not frightened of and just feel they can relate to. It has a texture, it has its materials, that even has its dust, or in case of the local, a bit of a smell, because the old building also smelled a bit specific. And that's something we as a firm really value. Also, if new buildings are made, we can also really enjoy raw new concrete, for instance. But it's an atmosphere we feel comfortable with.
Do you think there is some cool trend that doesn't work? I can say that this is a trend, transforming buildings into something new. And I think it works. Do you think there is something that doesn't work? For example, skyscrapers with trees that are not able to grow there.
It doesn't work.
Be negative.
I don't know. Well, no, I cannot really. Architecture that doesn't make fully use of the potential of what we already know. So architecture, that's, for instance, you take the example of the architecture, the skyscrapers with trees on top. It's more of a sales, except for some examples. It's more of a sales system than that's really talking about architecture. And in a way, it's a danger. In that way, I'm also quite happy with the trend that visualizations, as they were in the 90s, late 90s or early 21st century, there were these hyper-realistic images of a future to come. And we now, with a trend in post-realistic, as they call it, imagery, we find a kind of more more low to the ground and relatable way to express architecture. And that's something I really enjoy, because it's not so much about the image you buy, it's more about the product you buy. So model making, for instance, is also something that's now high on the priority list, because doing so many competition, we also have been doing a lot of renderings and art expressions. And we always try to find the right level of texture and light and matter. But the real matter is in the end always best. I think that might be maybe a little trend that's now changing, which for the good reason.
Yeah, well, interesting. And now I would like to ask you more about your office. When I find you on Facebook, I find out that you are part of Cloud Collective. What is the Cloud Collective? Can you explain us that international and multidisciplinary design collective?
Very good. Yeah, I mentioned, this is not really, I'll leave a nice picture for everyone to see, but it will be too far. I mentioned that we, as 4 partners, we really believe in the power of collaboration or accumulative knowledge and insight. So authorship is not, or individual authorship is not what we're aiming for. And that's something we also do in a larger perspective, in a larger group. It's even how we started working together in architecture. So we are part of a group, a network of design firms now, which believe this way of working is valuable. And at the same time tries to collaborate whenever they can, not only within the group, but also outwards. So for instance, this one of the partners in the Cloud Collective is a Paris-based scenography and exhibition design firm called Matters. And they're involved, for instance, because they know everything about scenography and about temporary installations. They're involved in thinking about this museum concept. And together with them, we have been building this temporary pavilion in Frankfurt, for instance. And one of the other firms, which is called Bright, is much more of a strategic design firm and an urban analysis firm. And in some of the more strategic projects, we collaborate with them and we exchange knowledge. So this is how we work now. In the beginning of this collective, we were even all one-man businesses. And at the moment now, there's several design companies working within the collective. We also do our collaborative inspiration tours. Unfortunately, one was canceled just recently because of the COVID-19 situation, of course. But that's what we share with this group, knowledge, inspiration, and also doing collaborative projects and research.
You are focused on civic architecture, or for architecture for people, museums, libraries, architecture where people meet other people. Do you now have some idea how our understanding of this type of architecture will change after the coronavirus experience?
That's a very good and very tough question, to be honest. Call us old-fashioned, but we do believe in real interactions, and we also believe that public buildings are in a way of some use to meet or to experience and to get to know the other with a capital O. That's the reason why we try to, at least in these kind of projects, try to approach them with all these different type of target groups in mind. And you see, these are ground themes, so I don't believe I'm not assuming that architecture can solve societal problems or something, but at least it plays a role in supporting things. For instance, debating places is also town halls, and debating places is a topic that we're now also very much interested in societies which are a bit more polarized in public opinion and political opinions. We believe, for instance, town halls could be the building types in our society that might need to have a redo to really support this, to be this platform again to people to get to know other one's opinions and to tolerate or understand or to find a way to deal with it. Let's say it like that. And I think buildings do that in a way. At least they support this thought. And as long as we live in big cities, and we also need buildings that help us coexisting in cities and in bigger communities. So that's why I believe public buildings, or at least publicly accessible buildings, are of a certain relevance, also of a political relevance.
Yeah, and last question from me is how Civic Architects works with young architects, students, interns, etc. Do you work with young architects, with students from foreign countries, for example? Do you have this experience, and how was the experience?
I think we always have in the whole team we kind of always have two interns that are not from the Netherlands. We really enjoy being an international team. Actually, at the moment, we only have one Dutch person working in the firm, and the others, also the non-interns, junior architects, some of them are also Spanish, Australian, Brazilian. So we have a quite international team, and we really enjoy the mix and the cultural surprises that come with it. So yeah, we do work. We have good experience, but it's we also are also really strict in the way we work with internationals. 90s have been known, especially in the Netherlands. The architecture firm have been known to be these kind of sweatshops in a way to work with cheap European labor because of Erasmus internships and we try to be a bit more honest with that. So you can either do a 3 or 6 month internship. Sometimes people bring an Erasmus for entrepreneurs grant, and then we say goodbye. Sometimes we also have some vacancies, but that are more separate worlds. But we really enjoy having people around, and I think it's also really interesting to just experience a half year of working, doing some competitions, assisting, also running projects. So everyone's invited. If that's why you ask the question, if you're interested, you can always try. Let us know.
Great. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Gert, very much for your presentation and for joining us, for joining Urban Talks.
All right. Yeah, thank you so much for the invite. Maybe we meet again, and enjoy your evening over there in the Czech Republic.
I hope so too. Thank you.
The weather is good. Go out and have a beer.
Goodbye.
All right. Thank you so much.
So that was Gert Kwekeboom, partner and architect from Civic Architects, Amsterdam. Thank you for joining us, ladies and gentlemen. You will find the whole session on YouTube and Vimeo, and have a good evening.